The three teenage girls, pointing and giggling at the elderly black woman's mismatched sweater and worn canvas shoes, had no idea they were mocking the person who owned every store they shopped in, every job their parents worked at, and every square foot of marble beneath their designer sneakers. 72-year-old Dorothy Mae Jenkins stood quietly outside the luxury boutique at Grandview Shopping Center, wearing a faded purple cardigan over a floral dress that had seen better decades, clutching a small cloth purse that looked like it came from a thrift store. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her comfortable walking shoes showed the kind of wear that comes from years of practical use rather than fashion consciousness. "Oh my God, look at her outfit," whispered Brittany, a 17-year-old whose father managed one of the department stores in the mall. "That sweater is literally falling apart, and those shoes? I think my grandmother threw away better shoes than that." "She probably got that whole outfit from Goodwill for like $5, added Madison, whose mother worked as a sales associate at the jewelry store 2 floors down. "I feel bad for old people who can't afford decent clothes, but there's no excuse for going out in public looking like that." The third girl, Ashley, held up her phone and started recording. "This is going to be hilarious for my TikTok. Look at this fashion disaster just standing there. Ma'am, did you get dressed in the dark? Because that is not a look." Dorothy heard every word. She had been standing outside the boutique for 20 minutes, watching the flow of customers, observing the staff interactions, and mentally noting the changes needed to improve the shopping experience at her mall. This was her routine every Tuesday morning for the past 15 years. An unannounced walkthrough of her property, dressed in ordinary clothes that allowed her to see how employees treated regular customers versus VIPs. But today's experience was different. Today, she was being filmed and mocked by children young enough to be her great-grandchildren, children whose families depended on the businesses she had spent 4 decades building. "Should we tell security there's a homeless person bothering customers?" Brittany asked, loud enough for Dorothy to hear. "I mean, she's just standing there looking pathetic. It's bad for the mall's image." Dorothy's hand tightened around her purse, but she remained silent. Inside that modest cloth bag were documents that would have shocked the teenagers beyond comprehension. The original deed to Grandview Shopping Center, signed in 1983 when Dorothy was 32 years old and had just purchased her first retail property with money earned from decades of working 3 jobs while raising 4 children as a single mother. The mall hadn't been called Grandview then. It had been West Side Shopping Plaza, a failing collection of empty storefronts in a predominantly black neighborhood that real estate developers had written off as unprofitable. Dorothy had seen potential where others saw problems, vision where others saw vacant spaces, and opportunity where others saw only obstacles. She had started with a small loan and a determination to create something beautiful for her community. Store by store, tenant by tenant, renovation by renovation, Dorothy had transformed the struggling plaza into one of the most successful shopping destinations in the state. Grandview Shopping Center now employed over 8,000 people, generated $47 million in annual revenue, and anchored the economic revitalization of the entire district. The boutique where the girls were shopping, Elegance and Grace, paid Dorothy $28,000 per month in rent. The coffee shop where they had purchased their expensive lattes paid $12,000. The jewelry store where Madison's mother worked paid $35,000 monthly, plus a percentage of gross sales that often exceeded $50,000 during busy seasons. Dorothy owned it all. Every lease agreement, every rental contract, every square foot of retail space carried her signature. The teenagers mocking her outfit were spending money in stores that existed because of her vision, her investment, and her determination to build something lasting. "Seriously, someone should do something," Ashley continued, still filming. "This is supposed to be a nice mall, not a place where random old ladies come to loiter in their pajamas. Mall security needs to step up." The irony was devastating. The security team that Ashley wanted to call worked for Dorothy. The mall management company that maintained the property reported to Dorothy. The corporate offices on the 4th floor, with their mahogany conference tables and original artwork, belonged to Dorothy. She had built this empire while wearing clothes just like the ones the girls were ridiculing. During the early years, when every dollar mattered and every expense was scrutinized, Dorothy had shopped at thrift stores and consignment shops, not because she had to anymore, but because those habits had been formed during the lean years when building her business required sacrificing personal luxuries for long-term investment. The faded purple cardigan had been a gift from her late mother, hand-knitted during the first year Dorothy owned the mall. Her mother had been so proud that her daughter had become a business owner, had made something of herself despite growing up in poverty, despite being told that black women couldn't succeed in real estate development, despite facing rejection from dozens of banks before finally finding one willing to take a chance on her dreams. Dorothy still wore the cardigan every Tuesday morning as a reminder of where she had come from and why she continued working at 72 when she could have retired comfortably years ago. The cardigan represented her mother's love, her own determination, and the responsibility she felt to continue creating opportunities for others. The floral dress had been purchased at a consignment shop 20 years ago, not from financial necessity, but from the habits of a woman who had learned to find value in unexpected places. Dorothy had built her fortune by recognizing potential that others overlooked, by seeing opportunity where others saw only problems. Her approach to clothing followed the same philosophy. Quality could be found anywhere if you knew how to look for it. Her comfortable walking shoes had been chosen for practicality during her Tuesday morning inspections. Dorothy walked every corridor, every stairwell, every service area of her mall. She needed shoes that could handle hours of walking on marble floors, climbing stairs to mechanical rooms, and standing while observing customer interactions. Fashion was secondary to function when you were responsible for maintaining a $47 million business operation. The teenagers' mockery cut deeper than they could imagine because it revealed the assumptions people made about worth, success, and dignity based on superficial appearances. Dorothy had spent 4 decades proving that a black woman from a poor neighborhood could build something extraordinary, could create jobs and opportunities, could transform communities through vision and determination. But to these 3 girls, she was just an old woman whose clothes didn't meet their standards, someone whose presence they found embarrassing, whose existence they thought diminished the prestige of their shopping experience. As Ashley continued filming and the other girls kept laughing, Dorothy made a decision that would change all their lives forever. She reached into her cloth purse, pulled out her phone, and made a call that would reveal the truth about exactly who owned the ground they were standing on. "Marcus, it's Dorothy. I need you to meet me at the main entrance of Elegance and Grace. Bring the management team and security supervisors. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." Dorothy's voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Marcus Thompson, her general manager for the past 12 years, had never heard that particular tone from Mrs. Jenkins during a routine Tuesday walkthrough. As Dorothy ended the call, the teenagers continued their commentary, oblivious to the fact that they had just triggered a chain of events that would expose their cruelty to the very people who employed their families. "Did you see her pull out that ancient phone?" Brittany laughed, probably calling her social worker or something. Old people and their outdated technology. Dorothy slipped the phone back into her purse and closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to remember why she had built this place and why she continued to wear her mother's cardigan every Tuesday morning. The memories came flooding back with startling clarity. 1983, standing in this exact location when it was nothing but broken concrete and shattered glass. She had been 32 years old, a single mother working as a night janitor at an office building, a weekend cook at a diner, and a part-time seamstress taking in alterations to make ends meet. Her 4 children had been ages 6, 8, 10, and 12. They had lived in a 2-bedroom apartment 6 blocks from here, in a neighborhood that the city had forgotten and developers had abandoned. Dorothy would walk past the failed shopping plaza every morning on her way to catch the bus to her janitorial job, looking at the empty storefronts and imagining what could be. She had seen possibility where everyone else saw poverty. The location was perfect, situated at the intersection of three major bus lines, surrounded by residential neighborhoods full of families who had to travel across town to find decent shopping. The bones of the plaza were solid. The previous owners had simply lacked the vision and community connection needed to make it succeed. Dorothy had spent 2 years researching real estate development, learning about commercial lending, studying successful shopping centers in other cities. She had attended every city planning meeting, every zoning board hearing, building relationships with local politicians and community leaders who initially dismissed her as an unrealistic dreamer. The first bank she approached for a loan had been politely condescending. "Mrs. Jenkins, retail development is extremely risky, especially in this neighborhood. Perhaps you should consider a smaller business venture, maybe a beauty salon or a restaurant." The second bank had been less polite. "We don't see how someone with your background could manage a project of this scope. Commercial real estate requires experience and capital that you simply don't possess." Dorothy had visited 17 banks before finding one willing to take a chance on her vision. The loan officer, a young black woman named Patricia Williams, had seen something in Dorothy's detailed business plan, an unwavering determination that reminded her of her own mother's entrepreneurial spirit. "I'm going to recommend this loan," Patricia had said, "but you understand the responsibility you're taking on? If this fails, you could lose everything." Dorothy had understood perfectly. She was risking her children's security, her own financial future, everything she had worked 3 jobs to build. But she also understood that some opportunities only come once, and that success required taking calculated risks that others considered impossible. The purchase had taken every dollar of her savings, plus the $200,000 loan that seemed enormous at the time. Dorothy had signed the papers wearing a dress she had sewn herself and shoes she had resoled twice, looking nothing like what people expected from a shopping center developer. The first year had been brutal. Half the storefronts remained empty while Dorothy worked 18-hour days, personally cleaning the common areas, painting walls, fixing broken fixtures that she couldn't afford to hire professionals to repair. Her children had helped after school, sweeping sidewalks and picking up trash, understanding that their family's future depended on making the plaza successful. Dorothy had recruited tenants by walking through the surrounding neighborhoods, talking to residents about what kinds of stores they needed, what services were missing from their community. She had convinced a local grocery store owner to move his business to the plaza by offering reduced rent for the first 2 years. She had persuaded a pharmacist to open a second location by demonstrating the foot traffic potential. Store by store, customer by customer, Dorothy had built something extraordinary. The grocery store had become an anchor tenant that attracted other businesses. The pharmacy had become a community gathering place where neighbors met and elderly residents could get their medications without traveling across town. If this story is touching your heart, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. By 1985, every storefront was occupied. By 1987, Dorothy had paid off her original loan and was considering expansion. By 1990, she had purchased the adjacent property and doubled the size of the shopping center. The purple cardigan she wore today had been her mother's gift when the mall first became profitable enough for Dorothy to draw a regular salary instead of reinvesting every dollar back into the business. Her mother, who had worked as a domestic helper for wealthy families her entire life, had been overwhelmed with pride that her daughter had become a business owner. "You did something I never thought was possible for people like us," her mother had said while presenting the hand-knitted cardigan. "You built something that will last, something that helps people, something that proves we belong anywhere we want to be." Dorothy's mother had died 3 years later, but not before seeing her daughter's success featured in the local newspaper's business section. The article had described Dorothy as a visionary developer who transformed a failing strip mall into a thriving community center that anchors the economic revitalization of the East Side district. Now, 39 years later, that same community center had evolved into Grandview Shopping Center, a 150-store complex that employed 8,000 people and generated $47 million in annual revenue. Dorothy's original $200,000 investment had grown into a real estate empire worth over $300 million. But none of that financial success mattered as much as the knowledge that she had created something meaningful for her community. Families shopped at her mall who couldn't afford to travel to expensive shopping districts across town. Teenagers found their first jobs at her stores, learning work skills that would serve them throughout their lives. Senior citizens had safe, climate-controlled places to walk during extreme weather. The teenagers mocking her outfit were beneficiaries of everything Dorothy had built, though they had no idea. Brittany's father managed the department store that employed 47 people and had been one of Dorothy's original anchor tenants. Madison's mother had worked at the jewelry store for 8 years, earning steady income and health benefits that supported her family. Ashley's family lived in the apartment complex 2 blocks away that had been built after Dorothy's mall success had attracted residential developers to the neighborhood. The improved public transportation, the increased police presence, the new streetlights and sidewalks, all of those improvements had followed the economic anchor that Dorothy's shopping center had provided. As Dorothy watched the girls continue filming and laughing, she felt the familiar weight of responsibility that had driven her for 4 decades. She had built this place not for personal glory, but to prove that extraordinary things could grow from humble beginnings, that vision and determination could overcome any obstacle. The sound of rapid footsteps on marble floors announced the arrival of Marcus Thompson and the management team Dorothy had summoned. They approached with concerned expressions, unsure what kind of situation required immediate attention during a routine Tuesday morning walkthrough. The teenagers noticed the gathering of professionally dressed adults and sensed that their entertainment might be coming to an end. "Oh, great," Ashley muttered, lowering her phone. "Here comes mall security to ruin our fun." Dorothy turned to face Marcus, her general manager, and the 5 department heads who had responded to her call. Each of them had worked for Dorothy for at least 8 years. They knew her as a fair but demanding employer, someone who remembered their children's names and their wedding anniversaries, someone who had personally approved every promotion and salary increase in their departments. They also knew that when Mrs. Dorothy Mae Jenkins called an emergency meeting, something significant was about to happen. The moment of revelation was approaching, and the 3 teenagers who had spent 20 minutes mocking the mall owner's appearance were about to learn that actions have consequences, and that cruelty directed at innocent people sometimes finds its way back to those who perpetrate it. "Good morning, Mrs. Jenkins," Marcus said with genuine warmth, immediately approaching Dorothy with the respect and familiarity of someone who had worked closely with her for over a decade. "What can we help you with today?" The teenagers' laughter died instantly. The casual way Marcus had addressed the woman they had been mocking as Mrs. Jenkins, combined with the obvious deference shown by the entire management team, created a sudden shift in atmosphere that even they couldn't ignore. "Mrs. Jenkins?" Brittany whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why are they calling her Mrs. Jenkins?" Ashley slowly lowered her phone, the TikTok recording she had been planning to post forgotten as she watched 6 professionally dressed adults treat the elderly woman in the purple cardigan like someone extremely important. Dorothy looked at each member of her management team with the quiet dignity she had maintained throughout the morning's humiliation. "I want you to meet 3 young ladies who have been providing very interesting commentary about our Tuesday morning security protocols." Marcus glanced at the teenagers, then back at Dorothy, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he began to understand the situation. "These young women," Dorothy continued, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to addressing boardrooms full of executives, "have been filming me for their social media, suggesting that security should remove me from the premises because my appearance doesn't meet their standards for mall patrons." The color drained from Ashley's face as she realized the elderly woman had heard every word of their 20-minute mockery session. Brittany took a step backward, suddenly understanding that the situation had become far more serious than teenage entertainment. Madison looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route, but found herself surrounded by mall management staff who were now looking at the 3 girls with expressions of shock and disapproval. "They believe," Dorothy said, pulling the original property deed from her cloth purse. "That I am a homeless person who is bad for the mall's image. They have suggested calling security to have me removed because my clothes are inappropriate for a shopping center of this caliber." Marcus Thompson's eyes widened as he recognized the document in Dorothy's hands. He had seen that deed many times over the years, usually when Dorothy was meeting with lawyers or city planning officials about expansion projects. The deed that established Dorothy Mae Jenkins as the sole owner of Grandview Shopping Center and all its properties. "Mrs. Jenkins," Marcus said carefully, "are you telling me that these young ladies were harassing you during your walkthrough?" "Not harassing," Dorothy replied with characteristic fairness. "Simply expressing their honest opinions about my appearance and my right to be in this space. I found their perspectives quite educational." Angela Morrison, the head of mall security, stepped forward with obvious anger. "Ma'am, I am so sorry this happened. This is completely unacceptable behavior, and we will handle this immediately." "Wait," Brittany said, her voice cracking with sudden fear. "Handle what? We weren't doing anything wrong. We were just talking." "You were filming and mocking Mrs. Jenkins," Marcus explained, his professional demeanor barely concealing his outrage. "Mrs. Jenkins, who happens to own this entire shopping center, every store you see, every job your parents depend on, and every square inch of ground you're standing on." The revelation hit the teenagers like a physical blow. Ashley's phone slipped from her trembling hands and clattered onto the marble floor. Madison made a small, gasping sound as the full implications of what Marcus had said began to register. "That's impossible," Brittany whispered. "She can't own this place. Look at her clothes. Look at her purse. Rich people don't dress like that." Dorothy smiled sadly at the comment that revealed everything wrong with the assumptions people made about success, wealth, and worth. "Young lady, I have been dressing exactly like this for my Tuesday morning inspections for 15 years. This cardigan was hand-knitted by my mother when this mall first became profitable. These shoes are comfortable enough for me to walk every corridor, every stairwell, every service area of my property." She gestured toward the bustling shopping center around them. "I built this place when I was 32 years old, a single mother working 3 jobs to support 4 children. I wore clothes like this then because I couldn't afford anything else. I wear clothes like this now because they remind me where I came from and why I continue working." Marcus pulled out his tablet and quickly accessed the mall directory. "Brittany, your father Robert manages our JCPenney location, correct? And Madison, your mother Carol works at Precious Moments Jewelry?" Both girls nodded numbly, beginning to understand the catastrophic scope of their mistake. "And Ashley," Angela Morrison added, consulting her own device. "Your family lives in Riverside Gardens apartments, which were built in 1991 after Mrs. Jenkins's mall success attracted residential development to this area." Dorothy watched the realization dawn on their faces. "Your family's livelihoods, your housing, your opportunities, they all exist because of what I built here 39 years ago. When I purchased this property, it was a failing strip mall in a neighborhood that everyone had given up on." She pointed toward the busy corridors filled with shoppers and families. "Every job here, every business opportunity, every reason this area has thriving schools and safe streets, it all started with a vision that most people thought was impossible." Dr. Patricia Williams, now Dorothy's chief financial officer, approached the group carrying a folder of documents. "Mrs. Jenkins, I brought the employment records you requested." She looked at the teenagers with professional coldness. "These records show that Robert Martinez has worked for our JCPenney tenant for 6 years and receives health insurance benefits that cover his entire family, including his daughter Brittany. Carol Henderson has been employed by Precious Moments Jewelry for 8 years, with steady salary increases and retirement contributions that support her family, including her daughter Madison." The teenagers stood in stunned silence as the full weight of their cruelty became clear. They had spent 20 minutes mocking and filming the woman whose vision and business success had directly created their family's financial stability. "I filmed you," Ashley said, her voice barely a whisper. I was going to post it on TikTok. I called you a fashion disaster. I said you looked homeless. You did, Dorothy confirmed gently. And now you understand that appearances can be very deceiving. Success doesn't always look the way people expect it to look. Wealth doesn't always dress the way people assume it should dress. Brittany began crying, finally comprehending that she had insulted the person who employed her father, who provided the income that paid for her family's rent, food, and clothing. Mrs. Jenkins, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. We didn't understand. Of course you didn't understand, Dorothy replied. Understanding requires looking deeper than surface appearances. It requires recognizing that every person has a story, a history, a value that can't be determined by their clothes or their age or their race. Madison stepped forward with tears streaming down her face. My mom always talks about how grateful she is for her job here. She says working at the jewelry store changed our lives because it's steady work with good benefits. And we were making fun of the person who made all of that possible. Dorothy nodded slowly. Your mother is an excellent employee. She has been promoted twice since starting at Precious Moments, and her supervisor consistently rates her performance as outstanding. The teenagers were now crying openly, overwhelmed by shame and the realization that their casual cruelty had been directed at someone who had profoundly impacted their lives in positive ways they had never considered. Marcus Thompson looked at Dorothy with the expression of someone who had worked for her long enough to know that this moment would become a teaching opportunity rather than a punishment. Mrs. Jenkins, how would you like us to handle this situation? Dorothy looked at each of the three young women who had spent the morning mocking her appearance and questioning her right to exist in the space she had created. She saw in their faces the same lack of understanding that she had encountered throughout her career, the same assumptions that had led bank officers to dismiss her dreams and city officials to doubt her capabilities. But she also saw something else, the possibility for growth, for learning, for transformation that could turn this painful moment into something meaningful. I think, Dorothy said quietly, that these young ladies have learned something important today about the danger of judging people by their appearances. And I think they might be interested in learning more about how this place came to exist and what it takes to build something lasting. The revelation was complete, but Dorothy's response would determine whether this moment became simply a humiliation or the beginning of something that could change three young lives forever. 6 months later, Brittany Martinez stood behind the information desk at Grandview Shopping Center wearing a professional blazer and name tag that read Youth Ambassador Program. She was explaining the mall's history to a group of middle school students on a field trip, telling them about a remarkable woman who had transformed a failing strip plaza into a thriving community center. Mrs. Dorothy Mae Jenkins was 32 when she bought this place, Brittany said, gesturing toward the bustling corridors around them. She was a single mother working 3 jobs, and everyone told her it was impossible. But she saw something here that nobody else could see. The transformation had begun that Tuesday morning when Dorothy had made a decision that would change 3 young lives forever. Instead of calling their parents, instead of banning them from the mall, instead of using her authority to punish their cruelty, Dorothy had offered them something unexpected, the opportunity to learn. I want you to work here, Dorothy had said to the 3 sobbing teenagers, not as punishment, but as education. I want you to understand what it really means to build something, to serve a community, to create opportunities for others. She had created the Youth Ambassador Program specifically for Brittany, Madison, and Ashley, a paid internship that would teach them about business, community service, and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to understand people's true worth. Madison Henderson now worked weekends at the mall's customer service center, helping elderly shoppers find stores and assisting families with disabilities navigate the complex. She had learned to see past the surface details that had once seemed so important to her teenage judgment. The coolest part, Madison told visitors during tours, is that Mrs. Jenkins still does her Tuesday morning walks wearing the same purple cardigan her mother made for her. She says it reminds her that success isn't about what you wear or what you own. It's about what you build for other people. Ashley Thompson had discovered a talent for social media marketing, but now she used those skills to highlight the positive stories within the mall community. Her TikTok account, which had once been focused on mocking people's appearances, now featured interviews with long-term employees, small business owners, and customers whose lives had been improved by having access to affordable shopping and employment opportunities. The video that had nearly destroyed 3 relationships with their families had been deleted, replaced by content that celebrated the diversity and resilience of the Grandview Shopping Center community. Dorothy's response to their cruelty had taught the teenagers something more valuable than any punishment could have achieved. She had shown them that true strength lies in responding to hurt with opportunity, that real leadership means transforming negative experiences into positive growth. The Youth Ambassador program had expanded beyond its original 3 participants. Dorothy now employed 15 teenagers from the surrounding neighborhood, providing them with work experience, college scholarships, and mentorship that prepared them for future success. The program's success had attracted attention from business leaders across the state. Dorothy had been invited to speak at conferences about youth development, community investment, and the importance of creating opportunities for young people to learn from their mistakes rather than simply being punished for them. But the most meaningful recognition had come from an unexpected source. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Click the next one, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes in kindness. 3 weeks earlier, Brittany's father, Robert, had been promoted to regional manager for all JCPenney locations in the state, a promotion that came with a significant salary increase and expanded responsibilities. During the promotion ceremony, Robert had publicly thanked Dorothy for the Youth Ambassador program that had transformed his daughter from an entitled teenager into a young woman who understood the value of hard work and community service. Mrs. Jenkins didn't just give my daughter a job, Robert had said. She gave her a completely new understanding of what it means to be successful, what it means to contribute to something bigger than yourself. Madison's mother, Carol, had been promoted to assistant manager at Precious Moments Jewelry, with a raise that allowed the family to move into a larger apartment and start saving for Madison's college education. Carol credited the change in Madison's attitude and work ethic to Dorothy's mentorship. Ashley's family had received the biggest surprise of all. Dorothy had learned that Ashley's younger brother had been accepted to the state university but couldn't afford tuition. Without telling anyone, Dorothy had established a scholarship fund that covered his full education costs, with one condition: he had to volunteer 20 hours per month at community service projects in the neighborhoods surrounding the mall. The 3 teenagers who had once mocked Dorothy's appearance now understood that they had encountered someone whose definition of success was completely different from anything they had previously imagined. Dorothy's wealth wasn't measured by designer clothes or luxury accessories, but by the 8,000 jobs she had created, the families she had lifted out of poverty, the community she had anchored and stabilized through 4 decades of consistent investment. Her success wasn't displayed through expensive purchases or ostentatious lifestyle choices, but through the scholarship programs that sent neighborhood children to college, the small business loans that helped local entrepreneurs start companies, the community events that brought families together in safe, welcoming spaces. On this particular Tuesday morning, 6 months after their first encounter, Dorothy was completing her routine walkthrough wearing the same purple cardigan and comfortable walking shoes. But now she wasn't walking alone. Brittany, Madison, and Ashley accompanied her, taking notes about needed repairs, observing customer interactions, learning to see the mall through the eyes of someone responsible for every detail of its operation. Mrs. Jenkins, Brittany asked as they paused outside the same boutique where their first meeting had occurred. Why did you help us instead of just getting us in trouble? We were awful to you. Dorothy smiled, adjusting the purple cardigan that had witnessed so much history, so much growth, so much transformation. Because getting you in trouble would have taught you to avoid consequences, but it wouldn't have taught you to understand consequences. I wanted you to learn something more valuable than fear." She gestured toward the busy corridors filled with shoppers, families, elderly couples, teenagers, people of every background and economic level. "This place exists because I chose to see potential where others saw problems. I chose to believe that something beautiful could grow from something broken." Dorothy looked at each of the 3 young women who had become so important to her vision for youth development. You were broken that day. Broken by assumptions, by prejudice, by the kind of thinking that keeps people from seeing each other's humanity. But I saw your potential to become something better. Madison wiped away tears as she understood the profound gift Dorothy had given them. "You saw us the way you saw this place, when it was just broken concrete and empty stores." "Exactly," Dorothy replied. "And look what grew from that vision." Ashley pulled out her phone, but this time to capture a photo of the 4 of them standing together in the spot where everything had changed. The image would become the header photo for the Youth Ambassador Program's social media accounts, representing the transformation that becomes possible when people choose growth over punishment, understanding over judgment, opportunity over revenge. As Dorothy continued her Tuesday morning walkthrough, now accompanied by 3 young women who had learned to see beyond surface appearances, she thought about her mother's words from so many years ago. "You built something that will last, something that helps people, something that proves we belong anywhere we want to be." The purple cardigan represented more than just her mother's love and her own humble beginnings. It had become a symbol of the truth that real success is measured not by what you acquire for yourself, but by what you create for others, not by how you look or what you wear, but by how you choose to respond when faced with cruelty, misunderstanding, or the opportunity to transform lives. The 3 teenagers who had once laughed at an old lady's outfit had discovered that they were in the presence of someone whose true wealth lay in her capacity to build, to forgive, to teach, and to believe that every person, regardless of age, appearance, or past mistakes, carries within them the potential for extraordinary growth. Dorothy Mae Jenkins had built more than a shopping center. She had built a legacy of understanding that would touch generations of young people who would learn, as Brittany, Madison, and Ashley had learned, that success is not about what you accumulate, but about what you contribute to the world around you.